There is a kind of man who walks into a room and something shifts. He doesn't announce himself. He doesn't perform. He isn't the loudest voice, the best dressed, or the most eager to be noticed. Yet people feel him. They are drawn to him without fully understanding why. There is something in his stillness, something in the way he listens, without urgency, speaks without desperation, and moves through the world as though he has already decided who he is. That is not charisma. That is not charm. That is the quiet magnetism of a man who has mastered himself. Most men spend their entire lives trying to become attractive. They change their appearance, their words, their social performance, constantly adjusting for the room they're in, the people they're with, the approval they're seeking. And yet, the more they chase it, the further it moves. Because attraction, real attraction, the kind that earns genuine respect and pulls people toward you without effort, it does not come from performance. It comes from order, internal order. Today we are going to talk about 6 habits that build that order. Not tricks, not techniques. Habits, deeply rooted behaviors that, when practiced with consistency, change the way the world responds to you. If this kind of thinking speaks to you, subscribe to Stoic Mindset. We go deep here and we go slow. Join the community and let's continue. Before the 6 habits, something must be understood. The modern world has completely distorted what attraction means. Most people think of attraction as something that happens between 2 people, a reaction, a spark, a social performance that earns approval. And so they approach it as performers. They think about what to say, how to look, how to seem. They optimize the surface and leave the interior untouched. But the people who are genuinely attractive, the ones who command a room without demanding it, they are not performing. They are simply being what they have built themselves to be. The Stoics understood something that most people take a lifetime to grasp, that the external world is a reflection of the internal one. How a man carries himself in public is a direct product of the discipline he practices in private. The calm he shows in a tense conversation is a product of the inner work he has done alone. The restraint he displays under pressure is not natural. It is trained. It is the result of a man who has, over time, brought his instincts under the governance of his reason. Aristotle described this as the cultivation of character through habit, not a single decision, not a moment of inspiration, but the slow, consistent practice of virtuous behavior until it becomes second nature. That second nature is what people feel when they are around a man who has done the work. They cannot name it exactly, but they feel it, and they are drawn to it. This is the foundation of everything that follows. 1. Emotional control. The first habit is emotional control, and this is not what most people think it means. Emotional control is not the suppression of feeling. It is not the cold, robotic detachment of a man who has shut himself off from experience. That is not strength. That is avoidance wearing the mask of strength. True emotional control is the capacity to feel something fully: anger, fear, disappointment, desire, and choose your response to it rather than becoming your response to it. Consider the difference between 2 men in the same difficult conversation. A colleague challenges them. A partner says something that cuts. A stranger disrespects them publicly. The first man reacts immediately, voice raised, posture defensive, ego on full display. He has become the emotion. He is no longer governing the situation, The emotion is governing him. The second man pauses. He feels the same thing, but he creates a space, even a small one, between what he feels and what he does. And in that space, he chooses. That pause is where all true strength lives. Epictetus taught that the only thing we fully possess is our response to what happens, not the event itself. The response. The man who trains that response, who makes it deliberate rather than reactive, becomes someone fundamentally different from the person who simply follows wherever his emotions lead. And people feel that difference, not because the controlled man is cold, but because he is reliable. Because in a world where most people are unpredictable and reactive, a man who remains steady becomes a rare and powerful presence. Psychologically, this matters because humans are deeply attuned to emotional regulation in others. We read it constantly, often unconsciously. The man who loses control in small situations signals instability. The man who remains measured in difficult ones signals safety, strength, and depth. That signal is attractive, deeply, instinctively attractive, because what people are ultimately drawn to is the feeling that you will not fall apart, that around you things remain grounded. Practice this daily, not in dramatic moments, in small ones. The traffic that makes you clench your jaw, the comment that makes you want to react, the minor frustration that rises quickly. These are the training ground. Every small moment of chosen restraint is a deposit in the account of self-mastery. 2. Silence and restraint. The second habit is silence, or more precisely, the discipline of not saying everything you think, feel, and know. This is rarer than it sounds. Most people treat conversation as a form of self-expression rather than communication. They share every opinion, volunteer every experience, fill every silence with sound. And the world is so full of noise that this has become normal. But normal is not magnetic. There is a particular kind of man who speaks less than he could, who does not rush to share his perspective the moment it forms, who allows silence to exist in a conversation without anxiety, who does not feel the need to fill it, dominate it, or escape it. That man is interesting, partly because what he does say carries more weight, partly because the restraint itself communicates something, that he is not seeking approval through speech. He does not need to convince you of his intelligence, his experience, or his value. He already knows what he is. Seneca wrote that the wise man speaks because he has something to say, not because he has to say something. That distinction is more significant than it appears. The man who speaks to be heard is always performing. The man who speaks only when necessary is always communicating. One is theater, the other is truth. The psychological reasoning here is simple. When someone volunteers everything about themselves early and freely, they remove the mystery. They give away what people naturally want to discover. But when a man is measured, when he listens more than he speaks, when he reveals himself gradually and only when it matters, he creates depth. People lean toward him. They want to understand him. They feel that there is more beneath the surface, because there is. Because the man who practices restraint in speech is usually the same man who does the work in silence and lets results speak in his place. Silence is also an expression of security. A man who is uncomfortable in silence reveals his need for external validation to fill the space. A man who is at ease in it reveals that he does not need the conversation to manage his sense of self. 3. Discipline in daily life. The third habit is the one that underpins all the others. Discipline in ordinary life, not discipline in the dramatic sense, not extreme sacrifice or visible suffering. Discipline in the quiet sense. The man who does what he committed to do, whether or not he feels like doing it. Who wakes up when he said he would. Who maintains his physical practice when no one is watching. Who keeps his environment ordered, his finances intentional, his schedule purposeful. The man whose private life and public life are consistent. Who is not performing discipline, but living it. This matters for attraction in a way most people underestimate. Discipline is visible, not always in obvious ways, but in the texture of a person. It shows in posture, in the steadiness of the voice, in the quality of attention, in the absence of chaos. People cannot always identify it, but they feel it. They sense around a disciplined man that things are under control, that he is under control. And that sense of order is profoundly attractive because most people are living in private disorder and looking, often unconsciously, for something steady to stand near. Aristotle made clear that what we do repeatedly is what we become, not what we intend, not what we plan. What we actually do day after day, in the hours when no one is grading us. The man who maintains discipline in those hours becomes, over time, someone whose character is visible in everything he does. The way he shakes a hand, the way he handles disagreement, the way he shows up again and again without drama. Discipline is also deeply linked to self-respect, and self-respect is the root of every other form of magnetism. The man who keeps his commitments to himself, who does not negotiate with his own standards, who does not make excuses to the mirror, that man moves through the world differently. Because he knows himself, he has evidence built day by day that he can be trusted, first by himself and therefore by others. 4. Focus and purpose. The fourth habit is purpose, and more specifically, the focus that purpose produces. A man without direction is scattered. His attention moves to wherever the latest distraction pulls it. His energy is distributed across too many things, too many desires, too many performances. He is everywhere, and therefore nowhere. People sense this. It reads as restlessness, as insecurity, as a man still searching for himself. A man with a clear purpose is different. His attention is not easily moved. His focus has weight. When he is in a conversation, he is actually in it, not divided between the conversation and his phone, his social media, his anxiety about how he is perceived. He is present. And presence, real, undivided presence, is one of the rarest and most powerful things one human being can offer another. Marcus Aurelius returned, again and again in his private journals, to the question of what truly matters. Not what appears to matter, not what the crowd values, but what is actually worth the finite hours of a man's life. That question is the beginning of purpose, and purpose, once found and committed to, produces a focus that other people can feel in your company. Purpose also changes how a man handles distraction. The man with no direction is pulled by every opinion, every opportunity, every shiny alternative. The man with direction evaluates everything against a single internal question. Does this serve what I am building? That filter makes him selective, intentional, and unhurried. And unhurried men, in a world of constant urgency and anxiety, are magnetic. 5. Detachment from validation. The fifth habit is detachment from the need for approval, and this is perhaps the most difficult of all. Every human being carries some need to be seen favorably by others. That is not weakness, it is biology. We are social creatures, and social acceptance once meant survival. But the man who allows that need to govern his behavior has handed control of his life to the fluctuating opinions of other people. And there is nothing less attractive than a man whose sense of self changes based on the room he is in. The man who has detached from the need for validation does not perform. He does not adjust his opinions based on who is listening. He does not become someone different at a job interview, at a dinner, in a relationship that he wants to impress. He is the same person in every room, not because he is rigid, but because he is grounded. His identity does not need external confirmation to feel real. This quality is unmistakable and deeply rare. People notice almost immediately when someone does not need their approval. And paradoxically, that absence of need makes them want to give it. Because the man who is seeking approval reads as insecure. The man who is not reads as complete. And completeness, the sense that a person is not looking for you to fill something they are missing, is one of the deepest sources of genuine attraction. Epictetus was direct about this. Concern yourself with what is within your control and release what is not. The opinions of others are never within your control. The character you build, the actions you take, the standards you hold yourself to, those are. The man who has genuinely internalized this distinction no longer exhausts himself managing how he is perceived. He invests that energy into becoming, and the perception takes care of itself. 6. Consistency in behavior. The sixth habit is consistency, and it may be the most undervalued of all. Consistency is not exciting. It does not make for dramatic stories or impressive highlights. It is simply the quality of being the same person, holding the same standards, the same values, the same level of effort, regardless of the situation. Whether things are going well or badly, whether you are being watched or alone, whether the person in front of you is important or not. And yet consistency is what builds trust. And trust is the foundation of every form of deep attraction, whether in friendships, in professional life, or in romantic relationships. People can admire the man who performs brilliantly once. They trust the man who shows up reliably, always. That trust is what converts admiration into genuine respect, and respect is the currency of lasting attraction. Inconsistency is one of the most common ways men undermine their own magnetism. They show up with full discipline and presence when it matters, and let it collapse when they think no one is measuring. They are kind in public and careless in private. They hold strong values in conversation and quietly abandon them in practice. And the people around them feel this, even when they cannot articulate it. The sense that someone is not quite who they appear to be, that the surface and the interior do not match. The consistent man has no such gap. What you see is what he is, in every room, every day. And that alignment between who he presents himself to be and who he actually is produces something that most people spend their whole lives trying to achieve with words: credibility. The quiet, unshakable credibility of a man whose life is a single, coherent thing. Let me leave you with this. Attraction is not something a man builds by thinking about attraction. It is the natural result of a man who has built himself. Every habit in this conversation points to the same underlying truth, that the most powerful thing a man can do for his relationships, his presence, his place in the world, is to bring himself under his own governance, to be the author of his responses rather than the product of them, to be the same man in every room, in every season, in every moment of difficulty and ease, to have no gap between who he is and who he appears to be. That kind of man does not need to seek attention. Attention finds him. He does not need to pursue respect. Respect accumulates around him the way water finds its level, quietly, naturally, without force. This is what the Stoics were pointing to beneath all the philosophy and all the teaching. Not a system for appearing virtuous, a practice for becoming it. Because a man who is genuinely working on himself, who is daily, quietly engaged in the honest effort of becoming more disciplined, more present, more purposeful, more grounded, that man radiates something that no amount of performance can replicate. He does not attract people by trying to. He attracts them by becoming someone worth being near. That is the work. It is never finished. And that is precisely the point.